Thank you for joining us today for this important conversation on ALS care and research updates. We focus on ALS all year long, and every May during ALS Awareness Month, we bring even more programming updates for our families. And this Facebook Live event is one of many resources MDA provides throughout the month and beyond. I'm Meredith Guerin, MDA Senior Director of Care Center Programs, and I'm looking forward to our conversation today. I'm honored to be joined today by Dr. Matthew Harms and Dr. Sabrina Paganoni. Dr. Harms is clinician scientist at Columbia University and also serves as a medical consultant to MDA. Dr. Paganoni is a co-director at MGH Neurological Clinical Research Institute and a physician scientist at the Healy Center for ALS at Massachusetts General Hospital. Dr. Harms and Dr. Paganoni, we're happy to have you.
Thanks, it's a pleasure to be here.
We are thrilled to have Dr. Harms and Dr. Paganoni with us today as medical experts. But please understand they are not providing medical advice during today's program. Any decision about your care should be made in conjunction with your doctor. ALS impacts tens of thousands of individuals within the United States. While there are currently 2 approved treatments for ALS, there is no cure or treatment that can reverse the progression of the disease. MDA is committed to continue to lead the way for innovations in ALS science and care. We have dedicated hundreds of millions of dollars to ALS research and care. So let's start the conversation today talking about ALS research. Dr. Paganoni, can you share with the audience about what the Healy ALS platform trial is?
Absolutely, I will be happy to. The Healy ALS platform trial was designed to fast new effective treatments for ALS faster. I'm very excited about this trial. There's strong support from so many in the community, including the MDA, that helped fund the trial. So what's different about the platform trial? So instead of testing just one drug, the trial evaluates multiple investigational products at the same time. This means more opportunities to find new treatments in a faster time frame. And that's because we use a central infrastructure. So imagine having to build a new dock every time a different ship came to port with new treatment cargo. That's how a traditional trial works. In platform trials instead, there is only one dock to receive all the cargo and connect it to all the cargo to their final destination. So we have one central infrastructure that we can use and share to test all the different treatments and continue to accommodate new treatments as they are discovered. And because we're testing them using a common infrastructure and a common master protocol, placebo data can be shared. So basically, we can evaluate different treatments, reducing the need for placebo. That means that for participants, there is a greater chance of receiving active treatment and a far less chance of being on placebo than in a traditional trial. So all of this contributes to the opportunity to find new treatments faster. And that's exactly what we're seeing. So we're launching the Healy Center platform trial in 2020, and we are enrolling participants at a faster speed than we did in previous trials. And we are testing multiple drugs, not just one. At this time, we're testing 4 drugs at the same time, and so we're going to really accelerate the timelines to test new drugs. And we're already working on adding 2 drugs. So again, overall, I think this is a great community collaboration and a great opportunity to accelerate the drug development timelines.
Absolutely, that's so wonderful to hear. And it's exciting to know that there are currently 130 active interventional clinical trials investigating potential therapies for ALS that are listed on clinicaltrials.gov. Can you share with us what's on the horizon for ALS research?
So maybe I'll jump in first here and just say that clinicaltrials.gov is a great place to go to learn about which types of trials might be available for a given patient with ALS. You can search for it. There are other ways of looking for that as well. The MDA, as well as several other organizations, have links off of their own web pages to different ways of looking for clinical trials that you might want to be involved in. Many of the clinical trials are interventional, meaning there's a drug therapy involved. The platform study that Dr. Paganoni just alluded to is one of those. But there are other types of research that are yielding tremendous advances in ALS. These are in the area and category of biomarker discovery and genomic discovery. So these studies don't necessarily involve getting an active therapy, but they are advancing our understanding. Biomarker studies look in the blood, in the spinal fluid, sometimes urine, skin, other different things, to try to identify markers of when disease might begin, when ALS might progress, and then to try to track the response to therapies if, in fact, we find one that is turning back the clock. The other type of study that I mentioned is the genomics type of research, where we look in the genomes of people to try to find the genes that cause or contribute to the development of ALS, so that we can then take those genes into the laboratory and figure out how to either mimic what they're doing, if they're a gene that is preventative or that seems to give resilience to motor neurons, or how to block its effect if it's a gene that, when mutated, goes on to cause disease. So in addition to clinical trials with drugs and therapies and interventions, there are also these observational studies looking at biomarkers and genomics to advance our understanding of ALS.
Absolutely, I completely agree. These studies are so important. And the reason we now have more active drug trials than ever is because of everything that we are learning in studies such as biomarker studies or the genetic studies that you mentioned. And I really want people to know that this is such a hopeful time and exciting time in ALS research. We are really testing more investigational products than ever, and we're doing so at a faster pace. So I would really invite people living with ALS and their families to connect with their local ALS clinic and consider participating in this research, because that really directly contributes to the development of new treatments.
Absolutely. And we have heard the question around, why is it that scientists can develop a vaccine for COVID-19 so quickly, but can't develop a treatment or cure for ALS more quickly? Dr. Harms, can you share your perspective as to why the COVID-19 vaccine could be developed so quickly, while the pace of research into ALS takes much longer?
Yeah, that's a really good point. My sister once asked me if Elon Musk can take a rocket that's in outer space and back it down and land it on a boat, how come neurologists can't cure migraines? How come you can't fix Parkinson's disease? So kind of asking that exact same question, but from a slightly different perspective. I think the COVID answer is that viruses are extremely simple. They have, maybe 20 parts and components. And the immune system is very simple, but very powerful. So essentially all you have to do is take a piece of the virus, show it to the immune system so that the immune system knows which direction to go, and basically give the signal for the immune system to attack. That's really fundamentally what happens with vaccine creation. And the tools for doing that have been around for decades. In fact, the basics understanding of viruses and vaccination has been around since before television was even invented. Now, take it to ALS and the complexities of the human nervous system, and in particular, the motor neurons. It's extremely complex, like a computer compared to an ice cream scoop. It's really that discrepant. So, believe it or not, your nervous system, the motor neurons linked up with the muscles that they go to when the embryo was microscopic. So they only had to grow, this far. And then, of course, as your body grows, it becomes very, very, very far apart. And the connections and the wiring diagram is extraordinarily complex. So the neurons are complicated, the circuits are complicated, and we need really complicated advanced tools in order to understand what's going wrong, and then even more complex tools to understand how to fix it. Now, the good news is that those tools are actually coming online. In the last 10 or 15 years, major advances in the development of the tools that are needed have occurred. Gene therapy, molecular therapies, genomics for us to be able to unpack the entire genome, big data analytics, the application of machine learning and artificial intelligence to looking at data sets. These things are coming online, and they really have launched a tremendous growth in our understanding of ALS, as well as drug development for ALS. So stay tuned, essentially, is what I'm saying, because we're kind of on the growth phase, and we'll be seeing the fruit of that as we move forward.
Excellent. What role do patient registries play in helping to move ALS research forward?
So I'll jump in first on this since I help work on several different registries. So a registry is basically a database of people who have a certain condition and basic information about them. There are several for ALS. One of the largest ones is the CDC's registry that takes information about individuals at the very beginning of disease and then periodically throughout. Another one is actually sponsored by the MDA and run by the MDA called the Mover Hub that collects data not just periodically on people with ALS, but at every single one of their clinic visits. And these registries are extraordinarily powerful because by applying advanced computer learning technologies, you can start to look for patterns. If we see this in a patient, what can we predict will occur 6 months down the line, a year down the line? What will we know that they're going to need from us as a clinic is one application of that, but it also helps us understand kind of where their disease might go for a clinical trial. And so things that we're learning from registries help Dr. Paganoni and other clinical trialists design faster, more efficient trials. And they also help us to be able to quickly locate groups of patients. So if a therapy comes along for gene X and you can go to one of these registries and look up all of the people who have that gene mutation and quickly identify them and send them recruitment materials, you could populate your trial very, very quickly. So registries play a very, very important role in moving ALS research forward.
Absolutely, thank you for that. Dr. Paganoni, can you share with us what compassion used to experimental drugs means, and how does this impact the ALS community?
Absolutely, I will be happy to. Compassionate use means providing access to investigational products to people living with ALS who do not qualify for clinical trials. Now, to be clear, the only way to tell if a drug is effective for ALS is to test it in a formal clinical trial. However, not everyone can participate in a trial because there are certain inclusion-exclusion criteria. So compassionate use enables an alternative path for people who do not qualify for clinical trials. They're also known as expanded access programs. They've been used successfully in HIV and cancer, and really the primary goal is to provide access to drugs that are in development. At the same time, we can also learn from this experience by collecting clinical and safety data in a broader population. That would be a population that is not eligible for the formal trials. And actually, I've been happy to work on expanded access programs at our center for the last 2 or 3 years. And now we are going to launch an EAP companion program to the platform trial. So more to come on this. I think it's something that, it's important for the ALS community to explore and continue to understand better. And hopefully we'll have more news on that very soon.
Wonderful, thank you. We know throughout the pandemic, telemedicine has played a crucial role in keeping individuals living with ALS connected with their care team. Telemedicine has also been utilized within clinical trials. What does the future of telemedicine look like, and do you see it continuing to play a role within ALS care and research?
Absolutely. So I'll maybe handle the part applying telemedicine to clinical care. I think probably everyone living with ALS, their caregivers, and every clinician dealing with ALS has benefited greatly by being forced to transition to telemedicine. Some centers were reluctant pre-pandemic, but of course everyone's embraced it now, and I think there's no looking back. People have really discovered that for a wide variety of problems that come up with the disease, telemedicine is a very effective way for troubleshooting and carrying out a clinical visit. Now, not everything that we need to learn can take place over telemedicine. There are some aspects of the physical exam that help us understand how the disease is changing, and new symptoms that are coming up do require in-person visits. So I don't think we're going to ever be able to phase out entirely from seeing each other in person. But for sure, we're going to be continuing telemedicine for quite a few of the different things that come up when taking care of ALS. And I think that's a really helpful thing. It will allow us to develop or deliver care more efficiently. And it will obviously save a lot of greenhouse gas emissions as people commute back and forth to clinical care centers, among many, many other things. So I think it's here to stay. I'm glad that it's here to stay. And we will get a lot out of it as we implement it efficiently.
Yeah, I completely agree. And telemedicine can be used effectively for research as well. During the pandemic, we did use telemedicine for many of our trials. And initially, we did so out of necessity to make the trials safe and feasible. But in doing so, we also learned that there are many aspects of telemedicine that can make trials better, more accessible, more patient-centered. As you said, telemedicine will never be able to completely replace in-person visits, but there are some features of it that are certainly helpful. And so I'm excited about the opportunity to continue to use telemedicine, both for care and for research, even after the pandemic is over.
Wonderful. Can you share with us, why is multidisciplinary care so important in caring for individuals living with ALS?
Yeah, absolutely. I've had the privilege of working in, I guess, 4 or 5 different multidisciplinary care clinics now. And the shared core feature, of course, is that every single one of them is staffed by people with unique experiences and expertise. So as smart as I might think I am, I don't know everything and can't pick up on every symptom or issue that a patient with ALS may face. And so having a team of people who have their own perspective on patient care, take their own time to understand what's happening for a given patient is extraordinarily helpful. It backstops the care that you receive so that things don't fall through the cracks, and so that things can be recognized and dealt with proactively as opposed to in a reactionary framework. So, multidisciplinary care for ALS is highly effective. It has been shown to help people live longer and to have better quality of life as they wrestle with ALS. And I think one of the outcomes of this is that now that there are certified centers and many multidisciplinary care clinics, is the opportunity for us to learn from one another, to implement best practices across different clinics. One good example we just talked about is telemedicine. So I remember right when the pandemic started, there were a couple of clinics that had already been routinely using it as part of clinical care. And the MDA immediately organized a get-together of all of the clinic directors to learn from those folks so that clinics that didn't have telemedicine had some ideas about best practices and how to implement it quickly. And that really rolled out telemedicine in the MDA Clinical Care Center network much faster than it would have otherwise. And I think as we all get together as clinic directors and people who work in the clinics and share best practices, patients benefit by hearing about the best thing that one clinic has come up with and then apply it in their own clinics. So it's an important facet of what the MDA does. It's an important facet of how we deliver care. It's a really effective way to take care of patients with complex diseases like ALS.
Yeah, well said. I love multidisciplinary care as well. I love the opportunity to learn from other clinics, as you just said. And the team approach is just fantastic. We continue to learn from each other, and we learn from the patients and their families. And multidisciplinary care is also a way to really personalize care, because we all know that ALS can be very different from person to person. Everyone is unique. And so we need to use a unique combinations of medications and supportive care to fit everyone's needs. And I would like to propose that research could be viewed also as part of multidisciplinary care, because research provides hope, provides access to potential treatments, and also gives all participants the opportunity to contribute to the development of new treatments. So I really love the fact that many centers really can integrate research as part of their multidisciplinary care.
I think I would just echo that, Dr. Paganoni, and say that, for many people with ALS, traveling and coming to clinic is difficult. And coming to the medical center again for a clinical trial visit can be even an additional added burden. And so you're right, to the extent that we can integrate research visits alongside of our multidisciplinary care clinic visits so that they happen on the same day or potentially in the afternoon while you're being seen in the clinic in the morning, or taking some of those assessments and moving them to telehealth visits to try to make it easier for patients to participate in research is a major thrust of I think what most major medical centers are trying to do with their multidisciplinary care clinics and their research, and kind of weaving them together.
Absolutely.
And for those of us joining today, if you're interested in being connected with an MDA ALS Care Center near you, you can log on to mda.org and use the Care Center Locator feature, or contact our National Resource Center. And Dr. Harms, we know there are many complexities to the diagnostic journey with ALS, and for some individuals, obtaining a diagnosis can take a while. What opportunities do you see for speeding up the diagnosis process for ALS?
Well, I'm really glad that you asked that. There are a number of task forces being formed to try to think about how could we speed this up. And I think one of the issues is that ALS is not that common, and so some practitioners, ear, nose, and throat doctors, orthopedists, primary care doctors may not recognize the symptoms at the very beginning. They might be limited to just speaking muscles, or just to one hand or one foot at the very onset. And so people may be thinking about, could this be carpal tunnel? Could this be a pinched nerve? Could the dentures be fitting poorly? Or could it be a stroke? Some things that kind of lead people off into a tangent and in the wrong direction. So one thing that I think is important is educating our physician colleagues so that they know what the signs of ALS are, so that when they're seeing somebody with weakness in the hand, they're thinking, it's most likely carpal tunnel, but could this be ALS? I need to be thinking about that from the very beginning. Hopefully that will shorten the amount of time required for a referral to a neurologist, who could then find the other signs that would lead to a more accurate diagnosis. This is extremely important because by the time weakness shows up in a limb, quite a few neurons have already gotten sick, and some have most likely also died already. And so if we're going to get therapies to people on the front end, while there are lots of healthy neurons to save, we have to make these diagnoses as early as absolutely possible. Everybody agrees that earlier therapy will be more successful than later therapy. We're seeing that with spinal muscular atrophy already, and so I think that applies in ALS as well. One of the second facets of early diagnosis is not just to get the ALS diagnosed, but to see if there might be an underlying genetic etiology, a genetic cause. And I think those of us in the field are moving towards earlier and more broad genetic testing for genes that cause ALS, recognizing that some of the molecular therapies that are being developed are very advanced. They're moving through clinical trials and may be available either in trial form or actually in as a therapy for people with gene mutations in some of the ALS genes. So kind of a two-prong attack. Educate non-neurologists what to look for that might be an early sign of ALS, and then once a diagnosis has been made, to push earlier genetic testing to identify people who might benefit from the molecular therapies that are being developed.
This has been a great conversation, and before we wrap up today, I want to talk about two special events coming up. MDA will be holding our annual MDA Engage ALS Symposium virtually this year on May 12th and 13th. This event is geared towards individuals living with ALS and their families. To learn more and to register, visit the link in the comments. Dutch Bros Coffee has supported MDA's work in ALS research, and their Drink One for Dane fundraiser is taking place on May 14th. Dutch Bros co-founder, Travis Boersma, started a program called Drink One for Dane 15 years ago when his brother and Dutch Bros co-founder, Dane, was diagnosed with ALS. Drink One for Dane remains a way to honor the legacy of a man who is known to inspire and positively impact all around him, and Dutch Bros will continue this fight with MDA until a cure for ALS is discovered. Dr. Harms, I know you are a fan of Dutch Bros and know them well, as you are from Oregon.
I do, yes. And every morning I'm drinking my coffee from last year's Drink One for Dane travel mug. So, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, please join me in raising your cups to say thank you to Dutch Bros, and check the comments for more information. To wrap up, thank you for attending today's Facebook Live event on ALS care and research updates. If you're unable to join the full conversation, the recording will be available for playback on Facebook as well as on MDA's YouTube channel. Thank you to Dr. Harms and Dr. Paganoni for joining us today, and for all of the work that you both do for ALS families and the community.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, it's been great. Thank you.
Thank you. Please join us back for our June Facebook Live event for conversation on gene therapy and neuromuscular disease. Thank you again for joining us today. Stay well.